Hello Lotus, and welcome back to the most informative Lotus channel on YouTube. Today we're going to share a 1-year, 15,000 mile ownership review and interview with my friend Mike from Getaway Driving. He's had a Lotus Emira V6 manual for the past year and put about 15,000 miles on it, which has got to be one of the highest mileage Emiras in the US. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you'll have seen Mike in a number of our past videos. He's a big-time Lotus enthusiast. This is the first one he's ever owned, so I wanted to sit down with him and talk about what it's been like to own the Emira for the last year, what he thought about before he bought it, what did he think it was going to be, what did it turn out to be? Is it a real Lotus? These are the questions we're going to answer, and we're going to also compare it based on his experience with the Emira Turbo as well as the Lotus Exige S240. I wanted to capture the sights, the sounds, and the smells of the Lotus Emira experience. And I got that, but I got more, a lot more. So let's go ahead. Let's get into that interview with Mike at Getaway Driving about the Lotus Emira.
I see a lot of comments online about it's not a real Lotus. The Emira is not a real Lotus. That is the real Lotus in the room with you now. Like one of those, it's just one of those comments that that you just hear over and over again, and I think just gets repeated. So the point is, the Lotus Exige S240, I think, is the quintessential real Lotus, because that's the hottest version of the most beloved car that is even more uncompromising because it's like track focused, and that's the car that sacrifices all the stuff and is lightweight and has a lot of power for Lotus. So I wanted to drive that car and then drive the Emira and go, is there something really missing here? Is it still for the drivers? What did I think the Emira would be like before I got it? I test drove the Evora GT back to back with a C8 Stingray. I found a dealer that had them both side by side on the lot, and I was like, this is my opportunity to get some seat time back to back. So I took them both out, C8 out first, and it felt to me like a Cadillac. In fact, I was like asking the guy, I was like, is there like a sport button? How do I wake this up? There's like no theater. This is a Corvette, it's got a V8. I thought it was supposed to have some sonic theater, and he's like, I mean, maybe there was. I found out online maybe there was later, but the sales guy was like, nope, this is it. And I was like, huh. And it drove around comfortable, just swallowed all the imperfections in the road, but it felt like a Cadillac. And then I got in the Evora, and it was a night and day difference to me, because the Evora was just drama. I mean, from the moment it thundered awake, windows down, I heard all the induction noise over the left shoulder. It was giving me just like this incredible sonic from the exhaust. And I thought, this is 100% Mike. This is the car I want. So I kind of hoped the Emira was just that it was just the same thing the Evora GT was. That it gave me the same feelings that short test drive did with the GT. But I also had all that experience in the Elise and the Exige. I knew it was going to be a bigger car. I was hoping that it would capture a bit of the feeling I get from those cars. But I knew that it was going to have power steering, even if it's hydraulic. I knew that it was going to have a longer wheelbase and be heavier. And so I just tried to temper my expectations, but I guess I was kind of hoping to be surprised in that way.
Do you feel like it drives anything like the Elise or the Exige?
What's funny now is I have experience in both the Emira Turbo and the V6. There's almost 15,000 miles on it now.
It's got to be. I mean, have you seen anybody with more in the U.S.?
I've seen, I don't know if they're in the U.S., but I've seen a couple people who are out there daily driving them. I don't feel like I drive it a lot, but I guess I do. But I bought it for that reason. In my mind, the Emira feels a little like an Exige that went off to college, went to therapy.
Got its freshman 15.
Yeah, now it moisturizes. It's just like, it's a more mature Exige. Yeah. It's a little more Exige adjacent than the Evora. But at the same time, it's not as visceral as the Evora out of the box. Yeah. So it's weird because it gives me more Exige vibes, like grown-up Exige vibes in its visibility, like the view out is a little more exige, just kind of extended. It grew up a little. But then the sonic experience is mainly the wear it out of the box, where it is not quite. And then, of course, the steering feel is reduced. Still the most you can get in any car in 2025, but it's not the Exige, which is just, a stick connected to the wheels.
When they announced the Emira, it was also, they were also announcing that they were ending the small platform stuff, and I feel like it just always happens, right? Where the online folks are like, well, I feel like people criticize it for not being one of the small platform cars, as if that's the only thing a Lotus can be, which there's been a lot of different Lotus models, it can be a lot of things.
I have a few issues with the sentiment online.
Yeah, what do you think?
One of them, and I'll tell the story for the camera, because I told it to you just off camera. I met a guy who had an Esprit at the coffee shop this morning, and he came up to me all excited to see the car. And we were talking about, and the first thing he says to me is, "What does Lotus stand for? Do you know?" And I was like, lots of trouble, usually serious. But that is so outdated at this point. These cars have had Toyota engines since 2005. You and I know from being with the club, we go out on these club drives that are 1,000 miles long, and those guys hammer on these cars. You still see these cars buzzing around the tracks like bumblebees. I mean, they're just, the people drive them hard, and they're like 20, 25 years old at this point, and I mean, they're just out there. It's not a Miata. Yes, the Miata exists, and we love it, and that's 2,300 pounds, and Lotus could have gone and made a Miata. And so I think this car is trying to capture a moment in time the same way that the Miata's trying to capture a moment in time, and the Miata's trying to be that experience of a 60s era British roadster. And then ironically, the company that made that car is trying now to be, I think, a 90s Italian supercar. I think it's trying to capture the experience of that Ferrari 360, which is the right amount of power for the street. So they're two cars that are aiming for different things. And if you look at that car, which those cars are beloved, they weigh the same. They're 3,100 pounds, same displacement, same dimensions, same spec sheet, essentially, except the Emira's got two fewer cylinders and a lower redline. So what is too heavy? Was a 90s Ferrari too heavy? I don't think anybody's complaining about that. People will argue about anything on the internet. I think that's what it is. People are just want to be contrarian sometimes. People want to defend the thing that they bought or want to buy. People, pick a car like a sports team and have never driven any of them. So the amazing thing about cars is there are cars for everybody, and there's cars that are trying to capture different experiences. And I think, you have to spend time with different cars to understand the differences. And it's hard to do because, these things cost $100,000. And how often can you get behind the wheel of one of those? Even just to do a couple of laps around, Speed Vegas or something is hundreds of dollars, and that's out of reach for most people. So I think having that experience is difficult, but once you start to expose yourself to the differences, you start to understand, okay, speed isn't everything. There's multiple philosophies, right? But the whole slow car fast thing, the Miata people certainly spread the gospel of that. And the reality is it's one valid philosophy of car enthusiasm, where I like to take a car that makes me involved in the acceleration in the gaining of speed, and then the trick is, since it's so hard to get it back, maintain that speed. And there's a skill and a rewarding input and output exchange in maintaining that speed, and that's a valid automotive experience. And then there's those who just like to just put their foot down and feel the power ignite underneath them. And then, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap when they get to a corner. And so that's valid too, because there's no right answer. So with these things, I feel like there's just everybody's got a certain thing that lights their fire. And for me, I don't have to brake on off-ramps. And, there's a lot of cars that can do that, but this one does it with so much confidence that it's just like, it's rewarding, and you get it out on track, and it's so encouraging in lifting my own limits as a driver. I went to Hethel and I did the full day track experience at the test track at the factory, and sort of drove in full anger over there on the wrong side of the
right side, you mean?
on the right side of the car, and so yeah, that was before I even took delivery of my car. So the enlightening experience there is that I have track experience. I've driven a lot of things on track. I've taken training on track. I've driven lots of different configurations, and I feel comfortable on the track. And when I got in that car on the test track, I was at my limits, and the car was still yawning. Like I messed up the apex, and I just sort of instinctively turned in harder, and the car was just like, okay. Just telling me that its ceiling was so much higher than where I was, and I was like, oh. Now I know the instructor's perspective, like, this guy's not even close. And so all that training, all that experience, and I was still nowhere near what this car can do. And so, it feels very planted. It has an incredible amount of grip. On that same day, I had it out on the skid pad, a wet skid pad. And it was hard to break traction, even on a wet skid pad. Like, it doesn't want to let go. You can make it do it, but it would rather just grip and turn. And so, there's an argument if there's some fun factor loss for those who like to drift around, but I don't have the budget for tires. So I appreciate that it just goes where I point it. I love this car. I think it's the best car I've ever owned. It's certainly cost-wise by a factor of 2. It's a car that does everything pretty well. And what I mean by that is, like, I can forget that it's a sports car and just kind of drive it around, and it's a car. Like, and that's, I think, a wild pivot for Lotus. Like all the other Lotus I've driven, even the Evora to an extent, have been like at the forefront of your attention at all times. I go back and forth on this because I've had the car now for a full year. If I'm going to do something to it, I should probably do it pretty soon. The cat delete and the valve controller are like kind of the first thing everybody does, because it does just make the car a little more emotional. I haven't done it mostly because I haven't been around enough. I've been traveling, and I swoop in, drive it a bit, swoop out. But there's a whole list of stuff I would love to do, including the full GT4 carbon kit all the way. I just love the look of the GT4 car. And I think this thing would be so mean with the GT4 accoutrements, right? And then doing kind of the carbon intake and some of that stuff just to wake it up a little bit. And then I have watched that. It's almost like famous now in the Emira world, the Valvetronic header kit video, where it just wakes that exhaust up to the point of sounding like a true exotic. Like even we're nipping at F1 cars at that point. I mean, the sound is incredible. And so that, but that is something I would wait until I'm out of warranty to do. So those are all on the list for the future, and I hope to keep this car forever because I think it's that timeless. I have driven the Lotus Elise many miles, so I lost track. So you and I drove your Elise sort of together from Boston to Nova Scotia, up to Nova Scotia, down to North Carolina, and then I drove it solo from Boston to San Diego so that you could meet up with us to do the San Diego Lotus Club hill climb. So that was, thousands of miles. That's at least 6,000 miles on that car alone.
Yeah, so you got a good number of hours logged.
Yeah.
Like flight hours.
In the other Elise, you know, up and down California a few times, it feels like, buzzing around with the Lotus Club, an autocross with that, and then with the '08 Exige S240, I've driven that from Chicago to San Diego, up to San Francisco rather recently, down California 1, back to San Diego. So there's that. I've driven my Emira 14,000 miles. I've test driven and ridden in the on track the Evora 400 and the Evora GT, and I've driven a Caterham around the Highlands of Scotland. So that was probably 1,500 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers around Scotland in the rain. And you know, I'll count that I ran the pass with Elisa and her delightful driving group in Stelvio. Pure serendipity, ran into them at the base of the Stelvio Pass and then ran the pass with them. But I was driving an Audi TT, unfortunately. I would say I have a lot of experience in all of the modern Lotus chassis. I haven't driven the Esprit, and I would really love to, so if anybody's watching this and wants to meet up and do a swap drive, I'm down for that. You know, in the Northeast general area, at least if you want to get behind the wheel of this one. So I don't know how they compare in that. I mean, especially the new AMG car being the turbo and the Esprit being a turbo. I'd love to experience it. So that's another. So when you asked earlier about my experience in different chassis, I've now driven the turbo car, the AMG car, 1,000 and plus miles as well. Boardwalk has been very gracious in letting me have access to the turbo cars in filming some content. A lot of people come to this saying, you gotta get a Lotus in a manual transmission. And I was one of them. When I ordered that car, I never even entertained the idea of an automatic. I knew that I wanted a forever car that I would row. To me, at the time, I wanted something that would live alongside a rotating cast of electrics, right? Because figuring electric is the future, and there's going to be fun stuff on the electric side, but that's not really here yet. And so I want to get this now and let this be my analog experience as a forever car. And so I get people wanting to, when they buy into Lotus, really lean into that. But there's a lot of buyers who just want like a modern, fast-shifting automatic, and Lotus has never really had an answer for that. The automatic transmissions that have been mated to the Evora and now the V6 version of the Emira are not at the level of a Porsche PDK or those sorts of things. They're a little, you know, they really brutally bounce off the red line and like cut you off, and then they can get a little out of sort when you're really pushing them. And so you know, there's that sort of history behind the sentiment as well, because people don't associate automatic Lotus as being like the top choice. So, you know, carrying that into driving the turbo version of the car, I was like, I'm going to try to like this car. I went into it being like, I made my choice. I'm very happy with my V6. I'm going to try to like this AMG car. And I didn't have to try. It charmed me very quickly. And I think the thing that was most surprising to me is how different of a personality that car has. Completely different car. Just an engine and transmission change. Of course, it's a little lighter. The steering's a little different. It's electro-hydraulic. But that car feels lighter. So it actually feels to me like the V6 is the new Exige, and the turbo is the new Elise. And the reason I say that is because the car feels lighter on its feet, the AMG car, which reminds me more of the Elise. The Elise feels lighter on its feet than the Exige, because it is a little bit lighter. And then the AMG car has a lot of symphonic sounds that are very dramatic. And some of those are like pops and bangs. When you get on the overrun, it's pop, 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 bang, you know, and that's a sound that I'm used to hearing in the Elise. And so it made me feel like I was in a next-gen Elise when I was driving that car. One of the key differences between the turbo and the V6 in my eyes is just how eager it is. It's got more torque down low, and it's faster. It's faster to 60 because of the shift speed. And when I drove the AMG, the guys at Boardwalk told me the same thing. They were like, hey, when you take this out, drive it hard. It likes to be driven hard, and it really comes into its own when you're pushing it. And so I took that advice, and it was great advice, because that car kind of tugs at its chain. It wants to play, and so you indulge it, and you play, and you're rewarded for that. Through sound and through just the feel of the chassis, and it is really, really charming very quickly. So now, I don't actually have a favorite. I tell people, like, if my V6, if I woke up and opened the garage door tomorrow and it was an i4, like I had a fever dream of a V6 and I actually bought the i4, I'd be fine with that. Like, I really like that car. And the turbo noises are almost extreme. I mean, when I say it wants to play, as soon as you start just easing out of your parking space, you can hear the spooling start to wind up. It's like that jet engine sound, and it's like, okay, all right, this is something focused. And then when you drive gently down the road, you get that spool up and then that psst a little bit. But when you really get on it, man, its blow off is intense. Its spooling is loud. You get those pops and bangs, and you're rewarded for that. And you want to hear those sounds because they're so cool and they just surround you. And so yeah, you find yourself darting around a lot just to participate in those theatrics. The V6 is it's a little like, what's your hurry? Like around town, you're shifting fast, and it's like kind of being finicky when you're shifting fast, and so it's almost like saying, what's your hurry? Now, when you are out on an open road or a track, those inputs become smoother, and then it's like, okay, let's open up and let's we're gonna play now. The 4-cylinder car, the AMG, is the opposite of that. It's like, come on, let's go. Why are we going so slow? Let's get on it and have some fun. And so around town, the cars are very different. I feel like the V6 likes to just kind of laze around, and it would rather play when you're out in an open field, so to speak. The 4-cylinder is just like a missile at all times between lights. I think there's like at least three things going on, three primary things going on. The first is that nobody knows what Lotus is. Outside of car circles, nobody has any idea. I drive that Emira around and I hear, hey, look, it's a McLaren. Hey, look, it's a Ferrari. Hey, look, I actually get a Maserati sometimes, MC20, and I'm like, you know what an MC20 is, but you don't know what an Emira is? Like, that doesn't make sense. But yeah, the most common question I get at the grocery store or the gas pump is, who makes that car? And so nobody knows it exists. So that's part of it. The other thing is people who do know what they are a little hesitant because of they don't know where to buy them and they don't know where to service them. And the fact is, like, Lotus has far fewer service centers than Porsche. Lotus people who've been with the brand for a long time kind of expect that, because they've always been a scrappy underdog experience. And I say this all the time, that Lotus historically, and I believe still now, are an economy class seat on Supercar airlines. And so, this is the economy experience. And you can upgrade to premium economy and get like an automaker with a
What are we talking? Are we talking Ryanair? Are we talking Spirit? Like, are we talking, like, do you get a seat at all, or you just stay in it?
It's not Spirit. Everybody's happy. But yeah, no, I think that you have to tolerate some of that stuff with Lotus. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. I mean, I don't even blame Lotus for that. It's like, man, the string of luck. They have an influx of cash. They have a beautiful new product, and they bring it to market, and then it's COVID, and then supply chain disruption, and geopolitical turmoil, and tariffs, and it's just been one thing after the other. Yep. And I've also seen kind of a little bit behind the scenes where, like, it's good people trying hard, but there is, in waiting for the Emira 2, there was a lack of communication from, about through these bumps, right? And I understand to a point, because they don't want to tell you something that then changes, and times were incredibly uncertain. But at the same time, people really appreciate you saying, we don't know, or maybe this, but don't hold us to, like, whatever the communication strategy is, it just wasn't satisfying to people. And so that, even those who were kind of pecking around the idea of it around that time, just fell off because there wasn't enough to pull them in. So I think that's part of it. Like that, the ownership, wrap that all up in ownership experience. Then it's just a little more challenging. And then the third thing is, like, Lotus have always been uncompromising in the drive experience and totally compromised in every other facet. Like, it's yoga to get inside. Once you're inside, there's no cup holders, there's no cruise control, there's no power steering, there's no carpet, there's no, like, it's a motorcycle with 4 wheels, right? And so
You want raw, this is raw. You want light, this is light. You want feedback, this is feedback. These are the compromises you make for the ultimate driving experience.
that is not for everyone. That is an absolute enthusiast's choice. And so the Emira is not that. The Emira is comfortable and even luxurious in certain ways. But that takes time to embed itself in the idea of the brand. So if you ask people what Lotus is, they get the idea of these little fiberglass, insect-looking things that run around the highway and are there and gone. So, when people think about a car that's going to do daily duty for them, or that they can just relax on the weekends in, something like a Porsche is going to come to mind quicker. So, Roger, you told me at a party, I think, that you bought a Lotus Elise. And I was like, what? I didn't even know you liked cars, first of all. And a Lotus Elise is a car that you have to mean it. Like, you have to be not only a car person, but like a car person with a total threshold for pain. Like, you are a car person to the extent that you don't need all that stuff I just mentioned, cup holders and trunks and cruise control and power steering, and it was a whole side of you I wasn't aware of at the time. And so your Lotus was the first one I ever drove, that Elise, and my initial impression of it was, this is a race car. It felt so raw because there is no insulation of any kind. Your feet are resting on the metal chassis. You can see the glue holding it together. And that sounds disparaging. It's not. The glue is like a revolutionary part of what they did. But like,
It's like the F40.
yeah, the bonded aluminum chassis is like the whole, like, that's Lotus's specialty. So that was the first experience. I think I was curious. At the time, my idea of Lotus, and this might go back to your question about why don't people buy it. My idea of Lotus was exotic supercar, not within reach. And I think when you said you had one, I was like, oh, maybe they are in reach. Or maybe you have a trust fund I didn't know about, but one or the other. But at the time, I was like, it kind of opened a door in my mind where it was like, you can have things like this. Like, you can go out and make a completely, what's the word I want to use? Because it's not crazy. It's actually, it's a great idea. You can go out and make a passionate decision that is different than everyone else, and it's within reach if you just prioritize it correctly. And that was a lesson for me at that time 15 years ago. So thank you, Roger, for that. And then I think there was a second moment. It revealed to me some of my own limiting beliefs. Because I think I had the limiting belief that, like, I couldn't have a car like that. And, you acquiring one was like, this is like something people can do. Because the first thing that came to my mind is like all the old Top Gear videos of like a helicopter chasing the Elise, around a airport runway. And I was like, man, that seemed so unattainable. But it isn't. And you're right, it's $35,000. I mean, that's like Corolla money.
They're more now, but back then.
Yeah.
It was 2010, 2011.
Back then it was maybe Camry money, but yeah, that just definitely shifted that for me. And so there's a moment you hear your favorite song for the first time, and then there's a moment that it clicks. And so your car was the first time I heard it, and the moment it clicked, the Lotus ethos.
Yeah, because you're like a pretty sensible person generally, so I always thought the Lotus thing would be hard to bring you into like something that's not sensible at all.
I mean, I'd argue, but so our Dan's Elise, our other friend's Elise,
Yeah.
we drove that car to a San Francisco Golden Gate Lotus Club event at Thunderhill, and we did autocross. So he very graciously let me drive it in full anger in autocross, and I knew I was driving it in full anger because I got one of the top times of the weekend. But in the process of that, I, for the first time, felt the car, and I felt all the sensations that it delivers that give you an intuition about what's happening under the wheels. So I very clearly felt the limits of grip. I was able to adjust my inputs based on how much I felt like I was loading up the tires. It was, and I didn't have to learn any of that. It was just intuition. And I got out of that car that day and I was like, oh, I'm sold on all of this. And you know, it wasn't that long after that they announced the Emira. And I was like, but they didn't say what it was, they didn't show it yet. They just said, we're gonna make a new one. And I said, I don't care what it is, I want it. And they could have rolled it out and it could have looked like a fruit cart. It could have looked like the Europa, but like,
I like the Europa.
I do love the Europa, but it's like, it's the cutest frog. Like, it's just like, you know, a face a mother could love kind of deal. But it could have been like van-like, like the Europa, and I still would have bought it because of those sensations and that experience. Now they rolled it out and it looked like a $300,000 supercar, and I think it's one of the most beautiful automotive forms sculpted in the past 40 years. But you know, that's kind of a bonus. I was hoping the answer would be no, I don't need Elise or Exige, but that's not the answer. The answer is I do want one of those cars. But I think what the Emira does is it might allow me to go more extreme on the other side of the garage and just get a caterer, because I get enough of that out of this car, and I feel like if I'm gonna get something that's really focused, I can just go full open wheel. Yeah. I have been in other car communities. I've had Miatas and Jeeps and Teslas, and there are communities around those cars that are very different in their personality and how they come together, right? Like Tesla is analyzing the new software update and finding all the, you know, stuff, and that was fun for a time because I like tech. And the Jeep stuff, I'm not like a serious off-roader, but I enjoyed kind of getting off the beaten path a bit. I used to set it up and work remotely, like it was a cabana office in State Park, stuff like that. And there were communities who would support you in like modifying the Jeep to do certain things that you wanted, and so that was nice. But I generally didn't feel part of it. Everybody I've met on the Lotus side has been awesome. The Lotus community for the drivers, they generally are. Like, they're generally people who, like, I said it earlier, where to buy a Lotus you have to mean it. And so everybody who is in that community means it. And so there's that shared passion, and that shared passion to a degree that people generally know what they're talking about. They're very supportive. There's this shared experience where, like, you know, after I said lots of trouble, usually serious isn't true yet, a lot of those guys have the old cars, the Elans and the Esprits, and so they do have this wariness on their face where they're like, oh yeah, you know, I'm waiting for this, or I'm swapping this, or but you know, generally the Elise Exige guys, the Evora guys, are just out driving them hard, and you know, there's a lot of fun to be had in joining them and doing that stuff. So that's like one community that comes with Lotus, but there's like another one. And this is the one that I didn't expect, where it's the people you meet because they're curious. And I've met so many people with this car that like it's almost a daily occurrence when I'm driving it. And you know, I've met people that have led to business opportunity. I've met people who have just really been outside of my own circles that I run, that lead to other contacts that are really interesting. And it's as simple as pulling up to a coffee shop and having somebody go, "What is that?" I can directly account for like half of the car's value in new clients that I've met by having the car. And so that's a nice perk. And I think what happens there as well is the Lotus is accepted into supercar circles. If you show up to an event with supercars, you know, those are very successful people generally. And they're people who know other people. They're generally people who have life experience and insight around opportunity. And I've had a Miata. I've shown up to these things in Miatas, and it hasn't been the same open door as showing up in something like a Lotus, where a Lotus, somebody who has, you know, a brand new Ferrari 296 is still curious about this car, and they come up and talk. And when you go on a drive, this car gets more attention sometimes. And so it definitely has that cachet that allows you to just hang out in these places and it be totally on the level of everyone else. And so it does open those doors. I have met a lot of great people and received opportunities through that experience. So the thing that I do is I search the world for the best roads. I've been doing this for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now. And it started on California 1, and first time I ever drove California 1, I rented a Shelby GT Mustang. And from Hertz, weirdly, they rent Shelby Mustangs. And drove it down California 1 and tapped into the vibe of the place. And it had this like incredible majesty to it. Like there's something very special about that place. You know, some places just feel different. And I just kept going back every year, and trying to find a different special car. And eventually I thought, maybe there are other roads. Maybe instead of changing the car, I'll change the road. And that's when Getaway Driving was born. And so I started traveling around. And over these 10 years, I've gone from Austria to Australia. I've gone from Nürburgring to Newfoundland and just tried to drive as many incredible roads as I could. I think I've driven 75. I started with a list of 25, and now I've driven 75. The list keeps growing because there's no shortage of incredible roads out there. But I've now started to document it. So I have a channel. I'm on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and getawaydriving.com, and I'm sharing these experiences as I do them, recording future ones. I'm going to go back to some places that I love and then also explore new ones. But in that process, I've driven a lot of cars on a lot of roads in a lot of places. People ask me, "Is it worth it?" And I don't hesitate. Like, it's completely worth it. And because like I know a lot of people are like. I saw this on Reddit the other day. There was somebody who came on their husband wanted a fancy car, had a $1,000 a month payment, something like that. And she looked at it like, this is a transportation appliance. Why would you ever spend that much money on this? And I chimed in and I was like, not really. I mean, for a lot of people, it's a social catalyst. It's a networking opportunity. It's a toy, of course. And it's, you know, it's not a replacement for therapy, but it's not therapy. There is something about a drive that connects you to yourself. And especially a car that is demanding a lot of you for inputs, because there is a flow that happens. And when you reach that flow, it is very meditative in that way. And then on the opposite side of that, on track, I've come out of Lotus cars on track and felt like I had just done yoga because I was fighting the wheel, and you use the muscles, you know, all four limbs are engaged in a way that you're using micro muscles and you're actually literally shaking. But the adrenaline is so intense, and the mental focus is so required at all times that you get out and you feel like a sensation like yoga, and I say that as someone who has, done yoga a fair amount. So those two feelings are kind of the same. So it's like all of those things, and not just the transportation appliance. And so when you add all of those up, especially the billables that you can maybe account to the contacts you meet, is it worth $1,000 a month or whatever it is? Hell yeah. Like I think so, if you have the means. But I think that we're only on this rock for a short time. You have to be okay with the attention. The attention is good attention. Like, it's surprising. It brings so much joy, and all of these interactions are so positive. I don't know if it's like that pulling in with a Ferrari or Lamborghini. I just don't have enough experience with those cars. Maybe it is. But with this one, I have never had a negative interaction with that car. Everybody's curious. Everybody's happy to see it. Kids are excited. Enthusiasts are curious. It's just always been a really positive thing. But that attention is pervasive. I mean, it's daily. You can't go anywhere in that car without. I mean, if you are the type to pick your nose, forget about it. You cannot pick your nose in a car like this, because there's like every car that drives by you on the highway is watching you. It's diminishing returns above this car. I think, if you are the kind of person who prioritizes driver engagement, if you understand and care about that more than a spec sheet, then I think you're a Lotus person. And if you're that kind of person, I think there's a path that you take. You probably start in a Miata, and then you graduate to a Lotus. I think a Miata is a perfectly good place to park forever too. But like, I usually tell people who are stretching to get a Lotus, start with the Miata, and then do fun stuff, autocross, track, whatever, and get to the point where you are, as a driver, maxing out the car. That'll take you a while, and then modify the Miata, and then get to the point where, you could actually stay there forever, but then get the Lotus, and so then from Lotus though, the step up is a pretty big step. I mean, to get like that driver engagement thing, McLaren doesn't have McLaren is the traditional next step, I think, but McLaren doesn't have a manual transmission anymore. So you could make an argument that you have to kind of jump above that, and what's above that? Well, now you're into BAC mono, or you're into Gordon Murray stuff, which is like, whew. I think Gordon Murray's probably the pinnacle, but now we're talking millions of dollars. Yeah, Porsche GT cars. I tell people, the Porsches are great. I don't think any Lotus person dislikes Porsche. Most of the Lotus people I know also play in Porsche land. I think the thing that stands out as the biggest difference is you can get the best Emira for $103,000 right now. That's before the tariff thing. And that's every option checked, and you can even upgrade it from there. But that's like base 911 territory. And in the Porsche world, a base 911 is like invisible. If you want a special Porsche, then you're paying way higher than that, even for the older stuff. And so the Porsche GT cars are incredible, but they're like 3-4 times the price now. And sure, they're maybe even an investment because they seem to keep going up in value. But yeah, you need a certain level of means to play. But at the lower end of Porsche, you're geared much taller, and so you're just participating less. You can be on the highway in second gear, and then your steering is pretty good, but it's an electronic rack, and it's just not as talkative as the Lotus stuff. And so if you prioritize engagement, you want third to be necessary at legal speed, and you want a little more chatter in your rack. And so that's where Lotus, I think, stands out at that price point especially. Number one, it's reliable. I understand some people have had some issues, but I think I have a theory about that. The issues that people have had, I think, kind of stem electrical in nature, and there was a recall on these cars really early on about water intrusion, which is funny because previous Lotus cars have had the same recall.
But this is U.S. market.
U.S. market, yeah, because it has to do with the wheel being switched to the other side. And I knew about that when I took delivery of my car, and I asked my dealer, if it had been remedied, and they had not remedied it because they didn't have the parts yet. But I drove the car 1,000 miles home, avoided rain. I did not want to get it wet because I was aware of that recall not being performed. And I got it home, and then the dealer here was great about getting me the parts and fixing it. And when they did that, I asked them to check. One of the places that the water gets into is an ECU harness. And I had asked them to get in there and check that harness for moisture. And they did, and there was moisture in the harness. So I don't know if it sat either at the factory or on the way over here or on the delivery lot and got wet. But they dried it out, resealed it, plugged it back in. My car has been bang reliable ever since. No issues. And it's been great for 15,000 miles. So I would encourage anybody who has an Elise who has an Emira or is thinking about one, just have your dealer kind of check that and make sure that recall was performed. Make sure that they get into the harness and see. And if you have a mystery problem, especially that's like some weird check engine light for like communication between something and something else, check the harness and dry it out or seal it, whatever. And I think that aside from that, most of these cars have been incredible, reliable. Second thing, these cars have way more storage than people give them credit for. So everybody's like, oh, it doesn't have any storage under the frunk like the Porsche. The Porsche gives you the trunk and the frunk, and that's way more practical than the Emira. The Emira has the shelf behind the seats. And everybody just writes that off. Oh yeah, there's a shelf behind the seats. That shelf swallows more stuff than the frunk in the Porsche. And so you can actually get 2 carry-on suitcases, rollaways, behind those seats, plus another soft shell, duffel or something. That's a lot of storage. So it's way more practical than it gets credit for. Yeah, you gotta motor the seat up, which is, I kind of wish it had the fast pull, and slide, but you do have a quick release to fold the seat forward, but to get like a duffel in there or a carry-on, you have to kind of push the button, motor it up. But yeah, if you fuss with that a little bit, car holds a lot of stuff. And the last thing is, it is, I think, the right price. So a lot of people are saying, oh, it's way too expensive. I don't think it is. And if you look at where all the other cars are, of course the Cayman's going away. The Cayman is discontinued now. The gasoline Cayman is discontinued as of October. So your choices at this price point are the Corvette, which yes, you can get a little cheaper, and the, I'm talking North America now.
Yes, a much uglier car with a pushrod V8.
Well, in a heavier car, in a longer car, in a car that, and I may get you some flames in your comments for this, but like, I think it's more of a GT car than a sports car, especially in Stingray trim where it's not as focused. So, it's not the same experience because you don't have the manual, it's heavier. And then you've got the base 911 at this point, which is a great car, but now if you option it at all, you're above the Emira. Lotus called this car a junior supercar early on in the marketing. I haven't heard him say it recently. Like, I understand why they say that, because it's not a supercar performance-wise, but it does carry the supercar cachet. It has the supercar presence, and it feels special when you drive it. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like they benchmarked the Ferrari 360 as a moment in time experience that they wanted to emulate. And so, especially when you upgrade the headers and wake up the sound a bit. And so, given that, I really do think it is a vintage supercar experience with a warranty. And if you understand it as that, it's the right price. A little higher than other sports cars like the M2 and the Supra and those things. Lower than the actual supercars. It's right in the middle. And if anybody at Lotus catches this video, please, I don't know if you've done this in the newer ones, when you shift into reverse and the mirrors auto tilt down, love that. Love it. When you shift back into first, the mirrors go, you gotta be a little faster. You need faster motors on the mirrors. That is my biggest complaint with that car. And when that's your biggest complaint, you have produced a phenomenal car.
If you have questions about the V6 or the Lotus Emira Turbo, leave your comments down below this, and we'll follow up with another video and answer those questions. So for the next week or so, place your comments there and we'll follow up. And as always, a Lotus is more than a car. It's a state of mind.